I've never done this before, so if you've never done what you're doing, we got good company. We'll make this real simple. I'm an operations guy, so I'm going to have notes. I've got the fob. I got everything here because whatever we do in the operations world has to work. So what we're going to talk about is going to make it real simple. I get to push the buttons. I'm a real simple guy, so we're going to have real simple slides. If it's too low scale, come see me after. I'll be happy to help you out. But really what I'm trying to do is give you some of the experiences that when entrepreneurs come to us, share with you some of the things that we've run into with them so you don't repeat those hurdles and try to make your institutionalization a little easier. So these are really the 5 topics. Now, every one of these is a topic in itself that could take an entire day. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these, and they are in this particular order for a reason. And part of it is to make sure that as you birth your product, you don't have to repeat steps. So the certification and claims, believe it or not, it's actually one of the most important things because it's really what you're going to build as a product. You don't want to get all the way down to the end of the cogs and go, you know, I think I want that to be organic, okay? You want to move that back up top. So whether you're non-GMO, whether you're kosher, vegan, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure that's up front. Same thing with claims. I want to have a good source of protein, an excellent source of this. Yeah, all that has to be really well defined. So I really encourage you, before you start down this path, get into the marketplace, go to Whole Foods, wherever your market is, bring that notepad, get thrown out of the store for lurking in there for hours, take notes on everything that's there, where it sits on the shelf, how much does it cost, what's in the label, what's the material, etc. We're going to talk a little bit about ingredients. All ingredients are not the same. I'm actually going to spend a little time on water, believe it or not, which is one of the biggest challenges we face when we replicate something from a house recipe to commercialization. Packaging and process, to get the Captiva guys over there, which is going to be great because there's a very tight dance between the type of process you use, say it's retort, cold fill, hot fill, HPP, and the type of packaging material that it needs to be in. Many times we get folks that come to us with a great bottle and a great idea, and those two just don't go together. Formulation, make it real simple. I'm going to talk about things at a very, very low level to just try to help you go through and make sure you don't make the mistakes that, again, we see on a regular basis. And of course, manufacturing and COGS, give you some idea of some of the things that are in COGS, so when you go through and you do your analysis, that process has to take place throughout the entire stage of the build of your product and concept. The last thing you want to do is do an HPP kind of a pressed juice product, and all of a sudden you start throwing chia seeds in, and you want to throw this in, you want to throw that in. By the time you get down to your COGS, you got a $55 product that isn't going to work in the marketplace. Okay? And last but not least is, I think there's a little quick story that I'll tell. Now, I'm going to tell it. If I know this is recorded, it will probably come back to haunt me sometime in the future, since the internet is there to be used against you at some point. But a story in my family, which has probably been told through other families, comes from my great-grandfather who was an immigrant to the country. And he truly, as the story has been told to me, came to the U.S. with the idea that the streets were paved with gold. He truly did believe that. He got here and he learned 3 things really fast. 1, the streets were not paved with gold. Number 2, in many places the streets weren't even paved. And number 3, he was doing the paving. Okay? So for you starting down this path, unless you have a war chest of cash, you're going to do the paving of this project. Don't be afraid of the details. Find good help where you're not strong. And the things that you're really strong in, just knock it through the park, okay? So when I say talk about identifying early, I covered a little bit of those. You've got to get those things really squared away because it's going to be the piece that walks through your entire puzzle. If you decide that you've got this great ingredient, you're using it, you go down the line, and all of a sudden you realize, I really want to be organic, they're not interchangeable in many cases. Sometimes it's just the substrate, whether it's an alcohol or glycerin, but in most parts, get that done early and really jot it down. If you want to have a 20% calcium load in it, make sure you have a 20% calcium. And by the way, I may talk more beverage than food, but the things still work the same way. If you've got a food product that you want to have a fortified kind of protein capacity in it, make sure you have that number down there right and understand how much you have to put in on it. Impact on labels. That was a great intro on labels. We see a lot of problems with labels. Particularly the fact that if you are going to have an organic certified product or a non-GMO product, that must be certified and done before you print your labels, okay? We have seen more than once people that have gone and run down and have done it themselves. Go ahead, get the label done, get the artwork done, get the print plates done, get a run done, and OCIA or Oregon TILF comes back and says, we want tomato, not tomato. On your label, you're going to have to redo those. And it's up to your co-packer to say, you're not running until these are done. Really understand that process, and no matter what you do, give yourself 30 days. I've heard it can be done in 2 weeks. I've never seen anything done in 2 weeks in an operation world, okay? Give yourself 30 days to get those labels approved, and that includes anything you put on it. And we're going to talk, someone remind me about fruit on labels when I get into the ingredients, please. Fees and timetable, it's the same thing. You've got to pay for fees. Kosher, $2,900, okay? But there's a reason you may want to consider kosher, unless, of course, you have bacon jam, even if you don't want a kosher product, and we'll get into that as well, so someone please remind me of that. For those of you, your label is a representation of who you are. When I was running Skinny Water, we used to get sued probably every 6 weeks. We'd get a lawsuit in for somebody asking for $10 million, and it would always go the same way. I bought your product, I drank it, I woke up in the morning, and I wasn't skinny. I want 10 million bucks, okay? Consider using an FDA attorney. Now, granted, we just threw them in a pile, had a big stack of them because there was no way we were even going to worry about it. But your product, in today's world, there's some 14-year-old kid out there in some science project that is going to test your stuff and see if it says what you're supposed to say. It just kind of happens. So make sure you use an attorney. Okay, they're not that expensive. You can do it for about $1,000 for about a label review. They're not going to be marketers. Okay, they're going to be attorneys. At the end of the day, you, the entrepreneur, decides what you're going to take back from that advice and put on your market. But most importantly, what you put out there, you have to live up to. So if you have a vitamin C claim that says you get 50% of your RDI in a serving, that doesn't mean you put in 30 milligrams in your product. You really got to put in like 60 because there's overloads. So make sure you really, really understand what you say and what you do, and make sure, more importantly, that it is exactly that case. Spend the money on the testing. Spend the money on the lab testing. We tell all of our folks this. We spend a lot of money on third-party validation to ensure that when you go to market and someone says, I don't think that's the case, we pull out that third-party piece of paper and say, we had it tested and we're good to go. CFR Part 21. It's a horror show. It's written by the government. Lots of regulations in there about claims and registrations and labels and foods and everything you can possibly imagine. Skim through it to the things that are important to you and only to you. You do not have to become an FDA expert to get through it, but it's something you should know a little bit about. And it's there for your use. It's got more information than you could possibly shake a stick at, but it is something you have to be aware of. So, first ingredient, I'm going to talk about water. Nobody ever talks about water, and it's been one of the biggest challenges we've ever had in this industry because someone who's at home creates this great recipe, they bring it to us, and we have a real difficult time replicating it. You have to understand that water is different in different parts of the country. We were working on a project, the guy was coming out of Southern California, we struggled a little bit with it, and come to find out his tap water is 9.25, very, very alkaline. Coming right out of his tap. Going certain parts of Texas, it's very alkaline. Going Massachusetts, it's 5.5. I would recommend really, really carefully that water has one of the biggest impacts on your product that you probably aren't aware of. But would encourage you, whether you're making a food-based product or a beverage-based product, use store-bought distilled water for 79 cents a gallon. Okay? It's neutral. Everything can build around it, no matter what plant you go to in the U.S. that's running some kind of filtered or deionized water. At least you'll get a very, very close profile. There are taste profiles, we call them edges. You get a hard edge in the water, it's very bitter, it's very structured in your teeth, very hard to get rid of, but it's a super, super important piece. So if there isn't anything you take away from any product you're developing, you put water in it, please do not use your tap water. Use this. You will shorten your development cycle significantly by doing that. All right, ingredients. All lemons are not equal. I've been told there's approximately 550 lemons you can buy in the open marketplace. And there's a reason for that, because many houses create a lemon that's very specific to them. There's Meyer lemons, there's all kinds of lemons. And what the point that I want to make on this is they're not necessarily interchangeable. If you have a lemon profile that you like, make sure you get a good supply chain with it. Sometimes you get to mix two lemons together, okay? In this world, it's a delicate balance. It's not one thing does the trick. It's like a toolbox, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit as we get down to this extracts, WAMF, and types. But when I talk about ingredients, you want to make sure that whatever you have a good supply chain of. And the next piece is this MOQ. You're going to have to learn to speak a new language of minimum order quantities, kilograms, pounds, etc. Because when you start working with a supplier of ingredients, they may have it, but you're going to have to understand that you're buying a lot of it. And this is one of the challenges that faces our industry, that a minimum order quantity maybe 40 pounds, and the next thing you knew, they say, well, how many gallons would you like? So you're going to have to kind of deal with a little bit of these things. So as you survey your vendors, there are great vendors. I could rattle off half a dozen of ones, and if you want to see me differently, privately, we can go ahead and talk about them, who help support an entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, get good samples, get lots of samples, contact everybody you think that's in your space, find out that, again, make sure it's organic if you've got an organic product, because the 5% NOP is not a bucket for catch-all for just anything under the sun. There are very strict rules about how that 5% can be used, mostly for processing aids. So if you want to use monk fruit, for example, there is a limitation for monk fruit. You can only use a small piece and make it a flavor, because technically you can't find organic monk fruit. Next, the third bullet point is actually really important. The world of flavors is built into extracts, concentrates, distillates, and aromas. And you'll see the word WAMF stands for with other natural flavors, and then there's a flavor type. So if you decide that you're going to do a lemonade, and you're going to make it, and you're going to use a bunch of things, you've got a nice big juicy lemon on the front, you've got these great lemon flavors, and unfortunately you're using only lemon types. A lemon type doesn't really have any lemons in it. It's a flavor that's made to taste like a lemon. And you will find out that if you put that on there and you go for your certification, you can't have a lemon on there. So you want to avoid those types of things. And of course, WAMFs, extracts, and distillates do different parts of the product. Some provide flavor, some provide aroma. So you have to kind of balance those out as well. But those are the three big things to worry about. Supply chain versus ball and chain, especially in the aromatic kind of teas that we work with. Very, very rich and unique ingredients. And I usually tell the story that if your key product is the blue moonflower, harvested on the hills of some Himalayan slope twice a year by a one-armed man with 7 daughters and overblessed by a shaman, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have a stable supply chain of that particular product. Okay? So no matter what you choose, and even in the most simplest of products, you're going to encounter things. So as an operations person, have a plan B. Always find some things that maybe can work together. Lemon juice concentrate. Still a problem in the industry right now. Organic lemon juice has been almost disappeared in December. One of the most stable things out there because of supply problems in Argentina. At the end of the day, even lemon juice is not interchangeable. So as you're looking at your product, try different things from different people and have a backup if you can't get one, because the reformulation process is very, very long. Okay? And then, of course, Frank's Red Hot Sauce. Don't put that thing in anything you make. Okay? That is not an ingredient. That is a product, okay? So we see all kinds of things. Oh, yeah, I do this, and I put in 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. That's, unless you've got a supply agreement with Jack Daniels for your barbecue sauce or anything like that, you really want to avoid using commercial products at all costs, because they really are very difficult to replicate. Making a Tabasco sauce or a Worcestershire sauce is very difficult to flavor match, okay? So what you want to do is avoid that. Just don't even use it. Unless you've got, as I said, unless you've got a great agreement with them, great, that's fantastic, but avoid it at all potential costs, okay? Packaging and processing, as I said earlier, a very delicate balance. You're going to have to learn, for those of you that, like myself, that took chemistry for poets, low acid versus acids and high acids and pH, and the scale's upside down. If it's low acid, why is it high number? All of these things have to work together in concert. So if you're doing a tea-based, a hot-fill tea-based, you need a hot-fill bottle, you need to work in a co-packing plant that has a hot-fill plant, the acid's got to be below 4. All these things work together. We do see, again, a number of times where people have an idea of a great product, a great package, but there's no way in God's green earth it's going to be built due to rules. And when I use the term shelf-stable, I'm not talking about how long the product will last on the shelf. I'm talking about the fact that it won't spoil on the shelf, or things don't create microbial problems that when your consumers drink it, you end up in a lawsuit, okay? So what you have to make sure you do is understand the relationship between how all these things come together, okay? Same thing with the fill. There's cold fill, there's hot fill, there's aseptic. Now I'm going to talk about these two right here very specifically. Retort, and everyone knows, everyone's heard of HPP in this business. Retort and aseptic. Bai is a perfect example. Bai 5 is a great aseptic product. Unfortunately, they've just about purchased somewhere around 95% of the U.S. aseptic packaging. So if you want to be an aseptic, you better get a war chest of money, because it's going to be hard to get into it. And not only that, only certain bottles are allowed to be in the aseptic world. Retort is typically glass unless it's a pouch. Same thing, only certain type of glass can work in that environment. There's only really 5 retort processors in the US. Typically you'll find dairy in that area. So understand that when you have your product concept and you're working with your product, know where it can be on the shelf and understand what type of packaging. If you have a question, call somebody. Because the last thing you want to do is be working in a milk-based product and find out that you can't get it co-packed anywhere. Or you're forced doing a cold fill in glass on a shelf and everyone knows fighting for the cold case, very difficult piece of business. Relationship with processing volumes. I'm going to speak, I have a very good relationship with many, many co-packers, but I will tell you in those early stages when you're doing your COGS, try to get low volumes. In the 7 years that I was working with the Skinny Water product, I reformulated it 7 times across all SKUs. You will change your product. You'll pop it out there, someone's going to love it, someone's going to hate it, one of your relatives is going to love it, another relative is going to hate it. You're going to end up having to fix these things around. So don't get locked into building hundreds of thousands of cases because you got a $1 co-pack fee. Pay a higher fee, get your product into the hands of the people that want to try, get that feedback in and make those adjustments eventually, okay? The idea is to be in this it takes a while to build one of these businesses, so plan on being in it for a while, okay? And then the impacts and considerations when you're working with this is that, again, you have to understand, when you work with co-packers, you have to understand the relationship with them. Millions of dollars worth of equipment that needs to continue to run as long as possible, and you want to make sure your product fits in there. So one of the things that we'll work with is if you have a package style, finding the co-packer that runs that package, what you want to do is try to get a piggyback run. So if they're running a tea-based product in a hot fill, and your product is in a similar package, what you want to do is try to get behind that one so there's no change fees. There are just little techniques that we can help or any, really work towards yourself, seeing who does what you want to do in your reasonable geographic area so you can get right behind it and run the benefits. We, everyone knows, well, maybe you don't, we run a product called Runa. It's a tea-based guayusa product from Ecuador, one of the great indigenous products that are coming out. But the bottle they use is what's called a stock bottle. We have 3 or 4 of the customers in that stock bottle. So what we do is when Runa runs at their processing plant, we put everybody else right behind it so they can run much smaller volumes, 1,000 cases, but they don't have to pay the change fees. The CIP fees are different. We try to just make it more efficient for everything to run. And you can do the same exact thing yourself. You just have to know what that plant runs. And that's going to be part of one of our next slides is to talk about when we get into manufacturing is a little bit of understanding. Formulation, okay, so for those of you that didn't go to cooking school, use standard units of measure and use weight. Encourage everybody to use grams, milligrams, etc., and use a good scale. Please throw the postage meter scale out. It rounds to the nearest 5, which doesn't really happen in the world. Understand it, get some tools. You wouldn't, if you were in the construction trade and you're going to remodel your bathroom, you certainly wouldn't do it without buying a few tools. So get some minor things here. You know, pipettes, liters, and stuff, because everything is done on weight. Water, for the sake of our discussion, when you do a 100 milligram sample, if it's a liquid, which would convert into basically 100 grams of weight, water weighs like 0.99998, it's close enough. And if you're doing a dry goods, use your grams and kilograms, but standardize everything you do. Standardize it into a 100 ml, standard it into 100 grams. Everything you do, make sure you work in those cases and take amazing notes. Every iteration you do, give it a formula number. Write everything down. So as you change your own home formulation, your own kitchen recipe, you have an understanding of where the minor changes are. Please, please, please throw out the pinch of this, dash of that. Oh, one of my favorite ones is then you add a handful of mint. Well, whose hand and how full is that hand, okay? You want to eliminate those types of things. There is an item that I want to talk about for a second, that is steeping. We do work with a lot of different, especially in the Ayurvedic side, where people steep a lot of different ingredients. They'll add, make a big pot of something, steep it all in there. That's a very difficult process to replicate in the manufacturing world. Only certain co-packers have the ability to steep. Certain ones only have jacketed kettles, which are needed to heat it. That's a process that you must be very meticulous in what you do. Time, temperature, top is closed. What'd you start with for water when you began? How much water do you have that's left over? What's the weight of the materials before you started? What's the weight of the materials when you took it out? They absorb water. You do this work internally, you save yourselves about 2 months worth of time. We did a project on a barley water. We ended up spending more time on that science than we did anything else. So the details are important, keep track of them. Manufacturing, once again, we talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to skip, the pH, we already talked about the relationship between everything there and the co-packers. I would encourage you to get a list of co-packers with an RFQ, very detailed of what you're looking to do, get it circulated, that will help you a lot. I'm going to skip down the documentation real quick. Organic documents, this will be about 13 of them per ingredient. Make sure you have your documentation from everything you get, keep it well organized. And then COGS. Whoops, how do I go back? This one? All right. Hopefully this slide will probably be one you can take home with you. These are all and I'm going to talk about just the material side, COGS, cost of goods, not the marketing side. This is everything you need to really consider when you do your per unit costing. And I'll make sure that everyone needs a slide of this, we'll make sure you get one. Whether it's bottle, labels, decos, can, litho, this is the things that you want to look at and try to work this into a case cost of unit of 12. Because if it's a 6-pack you end up selling, just kind of cut it in half and you add a few things. But at the end of the day, this is all the things you really need to look in there. And the allocations are, everyone forgets about these things. Shipping raw materials in, shipping raw materials out, make an allocation. Cross-dock charges, and of course, encourage you to start with a waste factor, believe it or not, of 3%. In the industry you should run, when you're running really well at a co-packer, running 50,000 cases, you're around 1.2, hopefully under 1.5. When you run 100,000 cases, you can bring that down to about 1%. Everyone forgets that the plumbing that goes from the batch tank all the way over to the filler loses about 600 gallons. So if you're running a small batch, that's all waste, okay? So it's the little nuance of that. Be generous in your COGS. It will help you in the long run as you go through the rest of your product production. How are we doing on time? About 2 minutes. So will you want to open up for some questions? Is there anything that you want me to jump to at this point? Again, more of a topic. I'll be here all day. Debbie, can you raise your hand so everyone knows who Debbie is? Debbie's a colleague of mine. If you can't get to me, please grab Debbie, and we'll go from there. Christina, anything else you need?
That is probably me saying, I don't think there are any questions from the floor. Oh, we do have one back
Oh,
here.
perfect. Yeah, somebody ask anything. I mean, anything. Make me feel good about that.
It's a very complete presentation. But yes, they will all be available for download afterwards. So please remember that.
You mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about during certification and claims about having fruit on the packaging. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. And that would have to do with the ingredients that are in it. We have seen in the past people put this nice big guava on their fruit packaging, but they're only using guava type flavor. That means that flavor was manufactured to taste like a guava, but has no guava in it. By rules, you can't put that fruit on the label, okay? It's very important as that relationship of what goes in it and what's in. The last thing I do want to talk about is kosher. I mentioned, I forgot to come back to it. Even if your product's not kosher, your co-packer will probably run kosher. And if you run on their line and your product is not kosher, it has to be re-kosherized. I know that's not a word. But at the end of the day, you will pay more fees. So consider using kosher ingredients, even if you're not going after the certification. It may save you some headaches down the line. Okay? Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it. We'll be around for any questions.